Dare to enter Crow's Quill's books, where tales of forgotten realms and fearless souls come alive. Today's journey, Raven's Prophecy. The Elder Trials, chapters 17 to 18, by Mark and James Lindsay. Will you uncover the truth hidden in the shadows? Chapter 17. Ivar Dalgard was petrified. The only son of the village baker, his life, so far, had been one of love and safety. His father and mother had doted on him, every chance they could, and in return he was a good son. Helpful, loving, and respectful. Prior to the Elder Trials, his entire life had been uneventful and safe. Other kids were always coming up to him, because of the sweet treats he had access to, but little else. He was overweight, he didn't look heroic or brave, and for the most part he was happy with his part in village life. But then the trials happened. Luckily for him, he had great friends. Ivar sighed at the thought of them right now, and how they must be doing. He pushed these thoughts aside. He couldn't count on them now, but Katla and Mjol were depending on him. "What was that?" Katla said with a start. "Nothing. It was nothing," Ivar snapped. He felt bad. Ever since entering the ruins, Katla had been jumping at every bump, squeak, and shadow, and despite the fact that he did indeed feel braver at the knowledge that the two girls needed him, Katla's fears were beginning to wear the baker's son down. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to be like this," Katla replied. Ivar could see in the dim light that the girl was shaking, the flame of her torch flickering wildly. He glanced at Mjol, who had been quiet since entering the tunnels. Her expression was pale, her eyes large. Her courage was hanging by a thread. Ivar was about to say something in an attempt to comfort the Osborne girl, but the words eluded him. Instead, he placed a comforting hand on her shoulder and shared a smile. It felt uneasy and a little strange, considering their current location. The corners of Mjol's mouth turned up a fraction, followed by the briefest of nods. "I know that this hasn't been the easiest of trials, but I've been keeping a pretty thorough track of where we've been going, and I'm sure that we're not too far from the center of the ruins," Ivar said in a low voice, mustering up every ounce of confidence into his motivational speech. Both girls could sense that he was leading them on a little, trying to help, and it was working, because they wanted to believe. "How much further?" Mjol whispered. Ivar thought this over a moment. "We're close. Real close. We'll be gone before you know it," Ivar said. "I hope," he thought. They traveled, slowly, carefully. Passing a number of turns, they eventually stumbled across a narrow stairwell that spiraled down. "This must be it," Ivar enthused. Katla, on the other hand, was less than thrilled. To her eyes, the stairwell was way too narrow, and even darker than their immediate area, if that was even possible. "It'll be hard to get down with these stupid chains on our ankles," Mjol agreed. "Then we be careful. I don't want to go down either, but the sooner we find the throne room, the sooner we get the hell out of here," Ivar said, his annoyance and frustration beginning to grow again. Both girls thought this over. "I suppose, Ivar, you haven't steered us wrong yet," Katla admitted. Ivar inched his way towards the stairwell. The light of his torch illuminated the intricate carvings that covered the walls of the stairs. The elongated dark shapes of men that looked like shadows, stretched between symbols and runes, stars and fire, the moon and the sun. "What are they supposed to be?" Mjol asked in hushed awe, her fingers brushing the edges of the stone engravings. "Gods, demons, creatures of the abyss." "Who knows?" Katla said with a shiver. "I think that King Drekavach and his people must have been into some weird stuff if they were worshipping deities such as this," Ivar said. The deeper they went, the darker and stranger the carved images. Flying serpents, beasts with multiple heads that bore human expressions, and misshapen creatures from the void. The stairs eventually bottomed out, Ivar tentatively entering a vast darkness. Mjol and Katla clinging to his side, the chains that bound them scraping the floor. "There's a torch on the wall," Mjol pointed out a large, leering face carved from stone, its mouth open and frozen mid-scream. Ivar saw this and thrust the flames into the open mouth. It went up immediately in an explosion of sparks and light, the hollow eyes now glowing like a demonic mask. Then, much to the surprise of the three teenagers, the light jumped from the torch to a thin grove jutting out from the top of the wall, filled with flammable oil. It raced around the room, igniting other frightening faces, and expanding the light until the entire room was bathed in light. A room that seemed to be the size of their village. At the center of the village, something so large as to take their breath away. "I don't believe it," Katla whispered. Taking up the bulk of the room was a creature that they had only ever heard in whispered tones. Legends made mention of its immense size, ferocity, and flaming breath. Before them lay a sleeping dragon. Scales that glittered with the colors of autumn covered its massive frame. Giant leathery wings were folded tight up high on the beast's back, and its tail was coiled the length of its body, the tip shaped like a three-pronged spear. The dragon's head was the size of a healthy bull, covered in large protruding horns that continued down the length of its spine. The three teenagers watched in stunned silence as the dragon slept, its breathing slow and labored, plumes of heavy black smoke drifting lazily from its nostrils. But the truly amazing aspect of the beast's slumber was the fact that it was laying atop a mound of gold coins that was bigger than it was. "We need to back away." "Real slowly," Katla urged. She was in the process of doing just that when she was stopped by Mjol. "This is exactly where we need to be," Mjol insisted. "Are you crazy? That's a dragon right there. If it doesn't roast us alive with its fiery breath, it will simply devour us with those immense jaws," Katla insisted. "You're still not seeing it, are you? This must be the throne room, and those are the coins we need to bring back." "We'll be the first," Mjol insisted. "And if we're not careful, the first to die," Ivar added. There was a long pause, as they let the gravity of their situation sink in. The only sound was the rhythmic, heavy breathing of the ancient beast. They watched its giant body rise and fall with each intake of air. They all knew what must be done, but were all reluctant to say it. Katla broke first. "One of us needs to get a coin," she suggested. More silence. Ivar sighed and raised a hand, his face weary. "I'll do it, of course," Ivar said. Mjol placed a hand on his shoulder. In a gesture of thanks, he nodded awkwardly back. The two girls positioned themselves behind the baker's son. Ivar readied himself. "If something should go wrong, I'll try to protect you, the best I can." "Okay," Ivar said. "Okay, sure," Katla agreed quickly, although the look in her eyes suggested that she didn't really believe him. "Only if there is no other way," Mjol added. Ivar returned. Her smile could literally feel his courage bolstered by her concern. "Not that we need to worry. We'll be back before you even know it," Ivar said with iron in his voice. He turned and faced his objective, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath, then opened his eyes, having resigned to play his part. "Let's do this then," he whispered. They jogged forward on the balls of their feet, thinking light. They ran with no sound. The dragon lay upon the mound of gold coins like a bed. It was clear that its bounty meant a lot to the beast. As Ivar moved forward, he noted that not a single coin was lying alone on the floor. The dragon had them all, every last one at its side. Ivar's heart hammered in his chest, both from the exertion and the fear. Approaching the dragon, it looked even more fearsome and beautiful up close. The way the scales shimmered in the firelight was mesmerizing. Ivar slowed down. They was now mere feet away from his prize. Thousands of gold coins wedged beneath its frame. He now inched closer, struggling to control any noise from his body. Then reaching out with one tentative hand and placed it onto the edge of the pile, he was half expecting it to burn, or something frightening and painful to happen. But it only felt cool against his touch. He let out a slow breath of relief as did Katla and Mjol, who watched tensely from their position behind him. "You've got this," Mjol whispered lightly. With the end in sight, Ivar gently plucked a coin from the pile, the movement like a blur, and without sound. He clutched it tight in one hand. The feat accomplished, he turned to leave and was confronted by an open-eyed stare from Katla and Mjol. They were frozen with fear. "What's the matter?" Ivar stopped mid-sentence with the realization of the cause of the two girls' expressions. Cocking his head to one side, he came face to face with an eye the size of a banquet plate. Ivar, too, froze in fear as he stared hard at the beautiful golden colors framing the deep black pupil. Then it blinked, and Ivar screamed, "Run!" Was all he got out, and their response was instantaneous. All three bodies working as one broke for the exit, the sound of the dragging chain drowned out by their frantic cries for help. The dragon slowly uncoiled itself and regarded the small fleeing creatures running for their lives, and in the hand of the largest one, a small gleaming coin. The beast now realizing what he was dealing with. A thief! The beast roared its anger, then drawing in a giant breath, released a jet of pure green fire toward the exit to its chamber. It struck the arch, just missing the trio departing, blistering and crackling the wood instead. The moment they made it through the doorway, they half-dived, and were half thrown to the floor by the force of the incoming green fireball, which narrowly missed them, instead passing inches overhead. Tired, scared, and sore, Ivar climbed to his feet, helping the others in the process. He knew they had no time to rest, as was evident by the continued roars of the furious dragon. Remembering what had brought them here, and what had now caused their current predicament, Ivar thrust the single gold coin into the pocket of his pants. "Keep moving," Ivar urged loudly as he dragged his companions down the length of the tunnel, casting one final glance over his shoulder. He saw, with growing horror, the pursing dragon was attempting to squeeze into the tunnel. Ivar could see the whites of its eyes and gleaming, exposed teeth. Chapter 18. Erik, Pace, and Den continued to run despite the fact the Dark Elves had appeared to have given up, although Erik doubted this was the case. He knew from talking with those that had encountered the warlike species, they wouldn't just give up on a slow or wounded prey. They were relentless in regard to the hunt. Erik suspected that they were still in pursuit, and were just playing with them, like a cat does with a mouse. "We need to stop. I need a rest," Pace gasped. Erik had been pushing them hard, and the terrain was hardly conducive to easy hiking, but the idea of being skinned or eaten didn't appeal to Lord Asolf's son, and he didn't care what Lord Ragga's lazy son thought or said. "That's not going to happen. We keep moving, or we die," Erik growled. "If we keep moving, I might die anyway," Pace replied. "And if you do, I'll cut you away," Erik countered, neither of the two doubting that Erik would do such a thing. A shrill, blood-curdling scream ripped through the air. They all froze. "Go, go, go, go!" Erik screamed. Not needing any prompting, Den and Pace started to move, the three of them scurrying through the undergrowth, ferns and low branches whipping past their faces. "By the gods, where are they?" Pace muttered, then screamed, clutching his right calf. An arrow decorated with black feathers protruded from the bleeding flesh. "Oh no," Den whispered, grabbing Pace. He dragged him on. Pace screamed again. 2 more arrows, the same as the last, were now sticking out from his left shoulder and thigh. This time they didn't stop, Erik now helping to drag Lord Ragga's son. Ivar had never been more scared in his life. The dragon had managed to enter the narrow tunnel and was wriggling its way through. "It's coming! It's coming!" Katla kept screaming over and over. Ivar ignored her, trying to focus on the path ahead, although he knew the beast was slowly catching up to them, despite the tight confines. They rounded a corner and raced towards the darkness ahead. The only torch illuminating the way was Katla's. She held it tight in one shaky hand. That was until she saw what lay ahead. A bridge, blown out from some long-forgotten conflict. They reached its edge and peered down into its black, endless abyss. Then, at the other side of the bridge, 40 feet away, Katla's torch slipped from her fingers and hit the ground. Throwing of sparks, she then dropped to her knees and wept. Ivar looked around and saw nothing but darkness. No way out. No escape. "What do we do?" Mjol asked, although she already knew there was no way out. "I'm sorry," was all Ivar could whisper. He turned to see the dragon coming around the tunnel. It glowed with mystical energy. There was nowhere to go, nothing they could do, and the dragon knew it. Drawing in a breath, it watched its intended prey and released its inner power. Mjol turned and hugged Ivar, tears running down her cheeks. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too," Ivar replied, hugging her back. A wave of green flame pulsed through the tunnel and consumed them all. Erik and Den continued to drag the sagging body of Pace, whose eyes were open, but vacant. "I can't keep this us," Den gasped, his body running on empty. "Don't stop," Erik replied, his body struggling with exhaustion. Pace's body went rigid, then completely limp. Den lost his grip, and Pace collapsed to the ground. "Can't you do anything?" Erik roared at Den, looking down at Lord Wagga's son. He saw the reason why. Pace had an arrow running straight through his throat. Dark blood covered the ground beneath, his eyes stare up, lifeless. Erik was speechless, for only a brief moment, then his survival instincts kicked in. "Grab him!" he yelled. Den acted out of pure instinct. Gripping the dead boy by the shoulder, the pair carried him onwards. They half crawled, half carried Lord Wagga's son through the thick vegetation, not knowing where the enemy was. Den wasn't thinking about the trials. He wasn't thinking about his friends or family. His only thoughts were that of himself, and how if he died, his body would remain here forever. Erik was just angry. No one had told him anything about this trial. Why did he have to be here with these two pathetic specimens? Why did his father hate him so much? This was so unfair. Pace slipped through his fingers, which were wet with blood. They fell clumsily to the ground. "What happened?" Den asked. He was disoriented and scared. "Why don't you just shut up?" Erik growled in reply, more silence. Erik looked around, confused and annoyed by the other boy's sudden silence. Then he saw why. Den's head and chest was covered in black feathered arrows. His eyes wide and wide. He was dead. "No!" Erik screamed. He was overtly confident in his abilities, but what was he supposed to do, chained to the dead bodies of two teenage boys? Gripping his knife tightly, he tried to cut through the heavy iron shackles, the edge of the blade scraping noisily against the metal, but doing little else. "Come on," he hissed. Then the scrape of leather brushing against leaves stopped him dead. He strained to see anything in the pitch black. "Come on," he growled. There was nothing. Silence, a pause that seemed to last an eternity. Then he felt it. Someone watching him. So strong he could taste it. Slowly turning his head, he came face to face with a living nightmare. The small head of a dark elf. Its painted face, long pointy ears, and teeth filed to sharp points, turning his anger to abject fear. All he could do was scream. Astrid, Magnus, and Mist were still trying to survive their waking nightmare. No matter how hard they ran, or how much ground they gained, the tall zombie warrior seemed to be gaining on them, no matter its poor, shambled walk. The adrenaline that was spurring them on was beginning to wear off. Magnus's face pale and drawn in the light of the torch. Astrid had never been so frightened in her life, nor she suspected the others. The creature that pursued them, unrelenting and fearsome. They had been running a long while, taking random tunnels and turns, their destination long since gone. She knew they were well and truly lost. She stared around frantically, trying with all her might to catch a familiar landmark. There was nothing. every wall and doorway appearing the same as the last. Magnus and Mist screamed for her to do something. Her eyes were bleary with fatigue and sweat. Then, in the distance, a faint chuckling. Only it wasn't in the distance, it felt like it was right behind her. Smug and condescending. The area around her became blurred and distorted. It was like looking through murky water. She swore that what she was looking at was another room, not the dark tunnels of the ruin. "Astrid!" a faint voice called out. It sounded miles away. Astrid turned but couldn't see anyone, not even Magnus or Mist. She looked down. The chain and shackle were gone. "Welcome, Raven," a deep voice from behind said seductively. Astrid spun around to face it. The tunnel was completely gone, the blurriness gone. In its place, a large room, ancient and dusty. The walls were decorated with various armaments, battle axes, war hammers, swords, and shields. There were tapestries depicting battles and pagan ceremonies. Rust, age, and wear had taken their toll on them all. At the far end of the room was a dais and a throne resting upon it. "Every 1,000 years a raven comes," the voice beckoned. Astrid's feet moved under their own power, the voice seeming to pull the blacksmith's daughter towards it. She could now see the throne more clearly, and what now sat upon it. The remains of an ancient king, his skeletal face peering out from beneath a tarnished crown. He was dressed in a tattered gray cloak, and resting in one hand a mighty sword. Astrid approached cautiously, both expecting and fearing the deceased king to jump to its feet, but it never happened. "So this must be King Drekavach," Astrid whispered, her voice echoing in the empty hall. "Indeed it is," the voice that had spoken to her earlier crooned. Astrid flinched, thinking it had come from the king. Then something moved from behind the throne. A darkness that was not born from the absence of light, but rather something darker and malignant. Then, before her eyes, it grew. Taller, larger, growing in mass behind the king, eventually forming the rough shape of a man. It stepped out from behind the throne, and even with a closer view, Astrid could not make out what she was seeing. The body appeared as shadow, both form, and yet no substance. Its face held a glimmer of light. From time to time, Astrid stared hard. She could see the hint of different shapes forming. Then gone. A bird's beak, tentacles, fangs. A single eye that became a million. Horror and hell. "Who? What are you?" Astrid asked. The creature laughed in reply. "I am the terror in the night. The beast that lurks in the darkness of man's madness. I am the evil that men do, but also the desires in which they don't. I am Basul," it said with pride. "Where are my friends?" Astrid asked, trying hard to remain brave despite the dire circumstances. "They are here," Basul replied, then motioned with one hand. The air shimmered around her. 8 figures materialized. It was her fellow competitors. They were all standing, but frozen in various poses, their faces slightly upturned towards the ceiling. Milky white eyes stared into space. Astrid was shocked. "What have you done to them?" she cried out in concern and anger. "Nothing. Yet," Basul replied. "What does that mean?" Astrid asked, afraid of the creature's answer. "It means that I wish to talk for a while, after which, and only if I like your responses, I'll let you and your friends go," Basul said. It was hard to gauge if what Basul was saying was jest or fact. The creature bore nothing that would constitute as a human face or expressions, and its voice was edged with a steady hum like a swarm of bees. Only its mocking laughter was a giveaway to its malevolent nature. "What do you want to talk about? Why me?" Astrid asked. More laughter. "As I have already said, I want to talk to the raven," Basul said. Astrid shook her head in puzzlement. "You're not making sense. I'm not a raven," Astrid said. Basul scrutinized the young girl for a long time. its gaze long and lingering, making the blacksmith's daughter feel small and vulnerable. "Are you sure? Because you look and smell like the raven," Basul replied. "Can you please stop calling me that?" Astrid said, agitation filling her voice. "You really don't know what you are." "Do you?" Basul said with obvious mirth. "I do, and it's not this raven that you speak of," Astrid reaffirmed. "No, you are wrong," Basul said, his voice becoming both firm and frightening. He gestured in the air with a single finger, and an image started to take shape. "You are the daughter of Fridas White Raven, a direct descendant of the woman known as Grim White Raven, former servant of the goddess Creatis, thief of the 4 elements, and first master of the 5 principles of magic," Basul declared. Astrid shook her head. "You've got the wrong person. My name is Astrid Mace, daughter of Ulrich and Turid, and resident of Greytree," Astrid persisted. "Incorrect. You were born on the Isle of Sorrow, under the gaze of the 12 true gods. Your sister Brenna was born first." "I have a sister," Astrid whispered. "Minutes before you, but in the eyes of those that sit above and watch, it matters not in who came first, but rather who was born during the ceremony. And in all those thousands of years, twins have never been born," Basul added. "But my parents," Astrid said, "are dead, as too are those who made it possible for you to enter into life," Basul said. "I don't believe you," Astrid said, shaking her head. "Believe me, or not. It matters little to me," Basul said. "My parents would have told me," Astrid interjected. She was starting to feel panicked about this creature who had been able to easily know so many truths of her origin, despite its grotesque appearance. "Your parents had made a pact. They were worried. But they also suspected," Basul said. "Suspected what?" Astrid whispered. Without even knowing, she had slowly started to approach the demon god, her curiosity now outweighing her fear. "Your potential for great power, as well as a darkness within," Basul said. "You lie!" Astrid cried, and at that exact moment the sword that lay in the ancient dead king's hand burst into flames. Astrid jumped back in shock and surprise. Basul doused the bright flame with but a wave of his hand. "Do you still doubt my words?" he said in an even tone. Astrid was silent. She didn't know what to say, look, or think. Was what the demon god said about her true? Did she just cause that burst of fire? And if so, what did that mean? Was she really someone special? And if so, what about her parents? And her sister? And the darkness within her? All these thoughts, and dozens of others, swirled through her head. "You're overthinking your situation," Basul said. Astrid felt as lost as she appeared. Then, despite everything she had just heard, the only thing that was really important was her current situation. Summoning up all her courage, she faced the demon god. "Why are you here?" Astrid asked. Basul was silent, and despite the dark chaos that was his face, she had the feeling that he was grinning at her. "Now that's a very good question. Probably the most important question you could ask, in your current circumstances," Basul said. Astrid was about to reply when the demon god silenced her with an outstretched hand. "I have wandered this world since its infancy, although truth be told, I am far older than that. I have traveled many worlds, many timelines, and done so in many forms. I follow the crooked path of chaos. I have watched the rise and demise of hundreds of races. I have seen new nebulas blossom, and suns nova. I enjoy watching turmoil and mayhem, and what results I feed," Basul said. "Feed. Feed. On what?" Astrid asked, her heart now hammering in her chest. "I take sustenance on the energy that all life emits, in particular fear and anguish," Basul said. Astrid looked about at their dead and decaying surroundings. "What is there to feed on?" Astrid asked. "Like a spider, I feed on the insects. such as yourself that wanders foolishly near my lair, but you would be surprised at what remains here to sate my appetite. For a little while longer, anyway. I'm glad that I was able to see yet another raven, Basul mused. So what happens now? Astrid asked. She was growing tired and anxious, and wanted more than anything to be back at home, with her mother and father. You will see them soon enough, but before we go our separate ways, I have some final words of wisdom for you. Okay, Astrid replied. I know you don't understand any of what I've mentioned here today, but you are in possession of great power. Immense power. But just because you can wield it doesn't necessarily mean you should, Basul said cryptically. Wait, I don't understand. Astrid started. The world around her went suddenly dark, then glaring bright. She held up one arm to shield her eyes from the intense burst of light. I can see someone, a concerned voice yelled out. Astrid attempted to see what was going on, walking slowly towards the light and voices. It's Astrid, Mist, and Magnus, a familiar voice called out. The blacksmith's daughter looked about completely confused, and was surprised to see her previous companions once again shackled to her ankles. They appeared as confused and disorientated as she did. The spectators, that were made up of the Thorn Trinity, Volin, and Asulf's soldiers, let out a triumphant cheer. As they led the trio from the ruins, Look, she has the coin! Lord Forsberg wasn't as concerned about their well-being. Astrid stared down. In one hand, she held a tarnished gold coin, in the other a sword, the very same as the one the ancient king had once held. Lord Asulf took the coin from her hand, his face impassive. Congratulations, you three are the first to emerge. Once again, they were bundled up by the soldiers and taken to the wagons. Astrid turned and called out. How long were we gone? Astrid asked. Lord Rage paused before answering. No more than an hour, he replied. How could that be? Astrid thought. She had assumed at least half a day, at least. The shackles had now been removed. They climbed back into the wagon, Astrid eager to talk to the others. Do any of you two remember what happened? She asked. Both Magnus and Mist looked tired, their eyes glassy. Not really, it was dark. We staggered around a while until you found the coin. Magnus shrugged. Yeah, I'm really glad this trial was quick and easy, Mist added. Astrid stared at the two, bewildered. She was about to reply, then thought about what she would say, and none of it sounded neither helpful nor believable. In the end, all she could do was nod back. That seals today's tale in shadows. We hope Raven's prophecy, The Elder Trials, has drawn you deeper into its enigma. Return soon to Crow's Quill's books, where the next chapter awaits, whispering secrets yet untold.